Welcome to Most Marvelous NYC, a podcast where licensed New York City tour guides share tips and tricks to help you get your very best New York City experience. We're your hosts. I'm Megan.
I'm JT.
And today we are going to talk about social media and how it affects and impacts our travel, and how we can perhaps use social media to help us get our very best travel experiences. So we're going to be examining the good side and the bad side,
And the ways that social media might lead us astray.
and maybe show you a little bit about how the sausage is made, because I make a lot of social media content about tourism. But before we get started, if you enjoy this podcast, make sure that you click subscribe and share it with a friend. Also wanted to mention that we are coming to you from the Welcome to Times Square office. Welcome to Times Square is a giant billboard in the heart of Times Square, where you can put a photo or a video up on this billboard for 15 seconds or more. The prices start at $150 and it will be shown for 24 hours. Visit timesquarebillboard.com to learn more.
It's really 15 seconds times 24.
Yeah.
That's a lot more seconds.
Ooh, and they just did a thing where on Saturday nights, you can get 15 uninterrupted minutes.
Seriously?
Seriously.
On a Saturday night?
On a Saturday night.
That sounds like a Wednesday afternoon deal.
No,
That's
it's a
amazing.
Saturday night. So check out timesquarebillboard.com. But right now, we are going to start our deep dive into social media and travel.
Yeah, we sort of started this thinking like Instagram versus reality, which is a very small aspect of what we're going to end up talking about. But I think nowadays there's a lot of travel advice and travel inspiration that people are finding from Instagram and other social media sites. And I think it's really helpful to kind of dig in and see what are some good ways to use that and what are some ways that relying on that without thinking about it might be problematic.
So first, let's talk about how one might actually use social media to plan their trip. Have you ever used social media to plan a trip?
You know, I was thinking about this. I'm still a little bit on the old-fashioned side, and I really like Google.
Tell us about that. Why do you like Google?
I think it's just more comfortable for me. I'm not necessarily like I came of age in the Google era. I didn't really come of age in the social media era. So I sometimes am confused about the idea of planning a trip through social media.
I hear
Plus,
that.
I also generally have an idea of like a framework of things that I think I might want to do. Just a couple of things that are always on the list that are like, I know that I'm going to want to check this off. And it's a matter of choosing. How about you?
Well, a really interesting thing is that, I run a tour company, and I would say 100% of all of my tour bookings come from social media. People discover me either on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, or perhaps even this podcast.
I hope so.
And I ask my guests, how did you find me? Because I find it to be really interesting. And a lot of them say that they found me on TikTok because they don't trust Google.
That's interesting. Why not?
The reason why they don't trust Google is because you can pay so much to be listed very early in the listings. And especially if you're visiting a market such as New York City, where there's so much volume. There's so many tours being offered, so many attractions. It ends up being just these like very high volume attractions that can pay a lot of money to show up very early in the searches. And sometimes if you scroll, like if you look for, say, Statue of Liberty tour, you can scroll and it will be, the same company or maybe the same 3 companies that make up the first 3 search results,
right?
Just under like a slightly different name or a slightly different sponsored post. So what these guests say is that they use TikTok as a search engine because it is a search engine. You can type in, just like you would on Google, you can type in private New York City tour or New York City tour guide or Statue of Liberty tour. And apparently I show up really, really high on a lot of those searches.
I had no idea. I really feel like I'm like, well, I can't wait to try this at home.
No, TikTok is a search engine. YouTube is owned by Google.
Right.
So, of course,
Wait, is there the same algorithm gaming on YouTube, do we think?
it's not really the same. You can certainly pay to like push a video. So, for example, if I really wanted everyone to see this video version of the
Ooh,
podcast,
let's do it.
I could pay to like boost it, and in theory, it would show up
Like $5.
earlier. Yeah, you can. I don't know. I once won a contest, like a social media contest, and the prize was to boost one of my videos, and it got like 6,000 views really fast, like while it was being boosted. And I'm not sure it's received a view since. So
Huh.
I don't know if boosting is good for the long term, but typically the like all I don't know the algorithms, but it really tries to push out stuff that it thinks you're going to be interested in,
Right.
YouTube. And I think it's a very imperfect algorithm. I recently realized that I am the fourth search result if you type in Bangladesh, because I tried some food, like some Bangladeshi food out in Queens. And I was like, I feel like if someone just types in Bangladesh, they don't want to see me eating Bangladesh food. But like I think about my own process when I go to book a trip, and I will often, like, my mom and I, we go someplace every summer, and I'll often go to YouTube and I'll be like, awesome places in Italy, and I'll see what pops up. And I usually am pretty satisfied with the search results. Instagram is not really a search engine in the same way. It's much
Right.
more difficult to search something the way you would on Google on Instagram. But TikTok and YouTube, they are search engines. So I find that a lot of people, and you would think that most of my guests are really young. They're not. Most of my followers are over 40.
So are you saying that I really am clueless?
I'm
Is that your
saying that
point?
you are clueless. No,
All
I mean,
these other oldsters have figured it out, but not me.
but I just think it's interesting. It's like an interesting little insight to know that people are using these social media applications, apps, as a search engine, as well as just inspiration. Even though Instagram's not a search engine, I spend a lot of time like just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and I'll see a girl in a pretty dress on a swing in Bali, and I'm like, I want to go to Bali, and I save it. And then when it comes time for vacation, I like look at my bookmarks on Instagram and I try to get inspiration that way.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of like how I think about, because I do a lot of the itinerary planning for our vacations as a family. And I don't know where it comes from. I think it just is like a catalog of ideas that I think are successful in my head that I'm looking for. I wonder if we'd have better vacations if I just went on TikTok. I'm really curious.
Perhaps you use social media in a slightly different way. So there is that search engine aspect of it. And of course, you can type things in like a search engine. You can also search hashtags. So I recently went to France and I searched hashtag Paris tour guide. I met up with an amazing tour guide named Sophie. Le Paris de Sophie is her Instagram. If you go to Paris, you definitely want to book a tour with her. But, we were just collabing and I found her simply using that hashtag. But if you're not into like using those applications the same way, a lot of people turn to Facebook groups for information. And I believe
I've seen those Facebook groups.
And I believe we belong to some Facebook
yes,
groups.
I am a member of one of those, at least one of those Facebook groups.
So what these Facebook groups are, for New York City, I'm trying to think of the names of them. I literally just type in NYC, but there's one called like NYC the place to be, or maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
NYC is the place to be. It's mostly for, I believe, English travelers who are coming to New York City, but they all share advice. So a lot of people will be like, "Oh my goodness, I'm planning my trip. I made this mock itinerary. Does anyone have any advice?" Or,
Yeah.
I'm traveling with 8 kids. Like, what are great kid things? Or some people are like, we just got back from our trip. Here are our notes
Here's
of
the
things we
download.
loved.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, what do you think of those? Have you used
I
those?
think those are really interesting. I do follow those. Not quite as much as I used to, but I do follow those. And I think that for some of those things, there's some real use. I mean, when you look, in particular, some of the English folks, I know there was a lot of talk about visa programs and how far in advance you needed to book those. So some really practical bits of advice. And then it's interesting to see, for me as a New York tour guide and a New York tourism sort of person, to see how people respond to things and to see what their kind of customer reviews are. Sometimes it's interesting. I found that with some of the pieces of advice that people are looking for, they receive advice, but the advice is like, I did this 10 years ago,
Yeah.
or I did this and I didn't like it because it was rainy.
Well, and the number of people I see that say, like, you have to see Mamma Mia on Broadway, or you have to see Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. And
Right.
both of those shows are currently
Gone.
closed.
Yeah.
It is like an interesting thing, because a lot of the people in the Facebook groups, they're not tourism experts, they're not travel experts, and they're not experts on the location that you're visiting.
Mhm.
So they, of course, had a very real experience. Like, their experience is real
And
they are,
valid. Right.
like, they are so excited to share it. I think there's so much golden nuggets, so many golden nuggets that you can get out of that. But if they only spent 3 days here, like, they may have loved their pizza place, but it's not necessarily the best pizza place.
Right.
Not that you have to eat at the best.
My favorite thing about seeing those sites, and I think the most useful thing if I were coming in and I wanted to get a sense of what's going on in New York City, are those rundowns. And the real, like, I'm going, it's, how long in advance should I, reserve my visa or something like that. Or like just practical stuff, like, how much did it cost you to take a taxi from the airport?
Or if someone, I have seen people get the number one taxi at the airport thing I see are people who get scammed at the airport.
Yeah.
Like, they end up, hopping into a car service when someone is, like, waiting right outside of customs instead of a yellow cab. And
yeah, some of those bits of advice I think are really useful.
yeah.
And the itinerary rundown afterwards, like, I just went, this is what I did. I always find those interesting.
Yeah.
Because it's factual.
Yeah.
Right. And it's almost like you can take it, this is what we did, and you can look at that and go, oh, that sounds really interesting. And it's doable.
Yeah.
Right. But then sometimes when people ask for advice, you get folks who don't always sort of state like, I haven't been there in 10 years, but this is how it was.
Gotta see Phantom
back
of
in
the
the
Opera.
2010s. Or is this neighborhood safe? And, people say, oh, it's Brooklyn, so it's not safe. And it's like, where is that coming from?
Well, I think you also have to take into account, why was the Facebook group created? The NYC is the place to be one. I really think that it's just someone who created a group that wants to help people. A lot of the Facebook groups were created by people who are trying to sell, like, a city pass. So they just, like, are really promoting city pass, which is, I used city pass recently and made a video about it, and I am now a fan. So there's nothing wrong with city pass. I actually think it could be really, really great for your trip. But to know that Facebook group was created as a way for someone to make a commission off of selling city pass. But then a lot of these, like, they're owned by, like, a company, and the company, I just remember somebody asked for Chinatown advice, like, where to eat in Chinatown. And I was so excited because I had just made a YouTube video about where to eat in Chinatown. And I thought, for me, it was like way more useful to just share that video than to like type everything out. And I'm also like showing you the food and what to eat. And I got banned from the group because it counted as self-promotion to share my YouTube video in the comments. And they said, you have to give more than you take. And I thought that I was giving by sharing this video. And I got banned from the group. So it's just like interesting to know like who isn't speaking and who is in those groups.
Yeah. I mean, I think in general, it's helpful to understand there's a lot of information out there, and just beyond social media there's a lot of sponsored information in a lot of different places, whether it's old school print or whether it's, one of these Facebook groups, or even maybe some of these, Instagram reels or something that you're going to see that look very authentic and are actually sponsored posts, which maybe you're not going to recognize right away.
I have very mixed feelings about sponsored posts. I make a lot of sponsored posts. I would be happy to make a sponsored post. And I think Jonathan and I we were just talking about sponsored posts and like how authentic they are. And it's interesting because sometimes I'll actually reach out to a brand because I love it so much. And I'm like, I just took this tour and I was like wondering if you want to work together. Recently, a Broadway show that I loved and have been recommending like to everybody when people say, what should I see? I'm literally like, you should go see this show. They just reached out to me for a paid collaboration. And it was like a dream because I'm already recommending it to everybody on my tours. And like when I create content, I write the script, I direct the script. I often have my partner film, but if he's not there, somebody else is filming. So we're the entire camera crew.
There's no outside influences.
Right.
Yep.
I then have to, edit it together and then take the time to like write the copy and post it. And it ends up being hours and hours and hours of work. And I'm essentially creating an advertisement, and I believe that I should be, properly compensated for that. And anybody who does it should be properly compensated for it. And I think
so that, like, in other words, the money that you're getting isn't really, it's not like a payoff to say nice things. It's really the money that is appropriate for the creative work that you did.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I think that every content creator that I know, they only...
You know the good ones.
I only know the good ones. I believe that 100% of the time, their hearts are leading with, I am promoting something that I strongly believe in and use myself.
Right.
And if I met the person that bought this product and they said like, I bought these earrings, this dress, this Broadway show, I went to this restaurant because of you, that they would feel really, really great about that recommendation.
Now, some people might be thinking, when are you ever going to meet someone who saw your video on YouTube? But we were in the park planning this show, and someone came up to you and said, I recognize you.
If you ever do see me or JT, please feel free to say hi.
Which is very funny. And she had like lots of questions.
She did.
About trip planning.
I think we helped her out.
I think so.
Yeah, we actually do. And I mean, as a tour guide, I often meet people who see my posts. But I also recently had an experience, like, just to share a little bit about how the sausage is made. It was not a sponsored. I was not paid to create this, but I was comped an experience, and I loved this experience. This experience, like, still in my memory, it is one of my favorite things that's ever happened in New York City. I actually was like crying on it because I was like, I've made it. But it was just so wonderful, this whole experience. And I had it a couple years ago, the experience.
I'm a little nervous to hear where this ends up.
No, I just like loved it. But then I recently went to book it for some people. And, I had seen the price. I knew what the price was.
Mhm.
But when I actually went to go and check out, there were $70 in fees
Oh, that's a lot.
per ticket.
That is really a lot.
$70 in fees per ticket, not per transaction, but per ticket. And I was buying it for 14 people.
That's a little baffling.
And I felt so bad because I was like, oh, like in my mind, this experience was so wonderful
Right.
for the price that I saw advertised.
Which was the ticket price, not including all the fees.
And you don't even know that there are fees until you click on the website 6 times.
Wow.
And then it says price does not include fees. And then you click the 7th time and then you
it says,
see
here's the fees.
Yeah.
Here's the $70 worth of fee per ticket. Wow.
And I feel very guilty.
Right,
because
because all of those, any of those people who would have taken your advice would have discovered that there was some sort of deception that was not your deception.
Right. I mean, the experience I still think is a really great experience, but was it worth the extra $70 per ticket?
Right.
I have to like reassess that.
Yeah. That's a lot. I think you told me what this experience was. And it to me, in my mind, it's like, okay, maybe it's worth it.
Yeah.
But maybe not.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's just I have like bad feelings about fees in general.
I hate fees.
I'm actually very curious what everyone thinks about fees. Feel free to write something in the comments.
Please do.
Because I'm in the process of changing my booking platform. And most booking platforms don't give you a choice. Like I can't say I want to cover the fees. I want to say like the cost of the tour is $100. I'll pay $3, out of my own pocket. They don't. Yeah.
Right.
So most booking platforms are like, nope.
For like credit card fees or something like that.
It's just like any fee. Yeah.
Yeah. I had something where the platform was like, and we're going to charge you like 3% for your credit card fee. And I tried to build it back in.
Yeah. And you can't.
And they're like, you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
So like sometimes you just like, depending on whatever the platform is. And I've been looking at platforms, and most of the platforms that are made for tourism, like have around a 3% fee that the tour operator cannot cover. It just always is going to be added. And they're like, oh, we have all of these tests to show that clients don't mind fees. And I'm like,
which clients are those? Not me.
At any rate, we're like off topic. But just like when I'm a consumer of travel, I do have to understand that when I'm getting advice from like a sponsored or a gifted post, that the experience that person has might be slightly different than the experience that I have.
Well, and this actually reminds me of something else that we were talking about for this show, which was really that Instagram feel, right? If you are an Instagram fan and you are seeing all of this, let's just say, for example, like New York content, and you see, I think the one we were talking about is you see like that observation deck content or like the sunrise content or some of these things that are special to folks who are doing these posts. So this is special access or early access that is not available to the general public. And so you can see this and go, oh, I want to do this observation deck at dawn. And that's not a product that's really offered in a lot of cases. Or, wow, this is so amazing. I want to get there. And I'm assuming that I'm not going to see anybody else. Right. And the reason why you don't see anybody else is because whoever's coming to do this post is getting early access on their own. And they're getting there so that they don't. I mean, the other thing, too, is that if you're a lot of times you want to make sure that everybody is consenting to be in part of a promotion. And if you get there early, you don't have to worry about the consent issues. But it looks really different.
It's so
if that's the experience you think you're going to get, show up somewhere and it's empty. Whereas the reality of it is you're going to show up there and it's going to be jam-packed full of people, especially summer in New York City. That can feel like a significant disconnect.
It's so interesting that you mentioned that. And I want you to talk about The Rock in a minute. But I want to just say,
not Top of the Rock,
no,
but The Rock, my rock.
I want to just say that I recently did a collaboration in Europe, and it was really hard to create the content. And I was like, why is it like so hard? Like I create content all the time. And I realized it was because I was having just the guest experience. And so I wasn't allowed to film anybody else on the tour,
Right.
and I wasn't like, there were all of these parameters because I had to respect naturally, of course, I had to respect the guests who
you
like,
wanted to respect.
I mean, I wanted to. It was also like, part of the deal.
Right.
But like, of course, you don't want to make anybody be on a social media post who doesn't want to be like on a social media post. But just at least when I'm only creating content at these like observation decks where you get to go at sunrise and it's like just you and other content creators and you're all in your like, you bring 8 ball gowns and you're all helping film each other in slow motion as you like run towards the sunrise. It's actually,
this sounds more than theoretical. I think you've done this before, haven't you?
I have. It's I mean, it's not easy, but like you're set up for success of creating these like wonderful emotions. And those emotions are emotions that I have at observation decks, no matter what time I go. So I can go like in the middle of the day. And when I look out, I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm flying. But in terms of creating the video that's going to make someone go, oh my God, I feel like I'm flying. That's something that I have to do when there's not other people around. So I find that a lot of people will want to come specifically to create content. Like people specifically go to an observation deck because they
even
want
if they're
to
not
get
content
that photo.
creators, they want to match their reality to what they've previously seen on social media.
Right.
Which it's funny because we were talking about this and I thought, well, that's not really me because I'm not really a social media guy. And then I had this funny realization because I bought some stamps. And last summer we went out to Colorado and I very specifically told everybody that one of the things that we're going to do is we're going to get a pass to go to this place called the Maroon Bells. And I told everybody, like, this is why we're doing it, because this is one of the most famous scenes in Colorado and I want to see it. Right. So we had to like get up super early so that we could get into, it's a national forest and you only have this specific window to get in. You have to get out at a certain time. So it was like a lot of hoops to go through. And I said, the reason why we're doing this is one of the most like common photos you're going to see of the beauty of Colorado. So I bought these stamps and they're Ansel Adams stamps. So my background is in photography. That was my undergraduate degree. And Ansel Adams, back when I was going to school, he wasn't like a Hawkeye to talk about. He was sort of past. But anybody that you talk to at that point in time, back in the day, they'd say, oh, you want to be like Ansel Adams, right? He's like a touchstone of landscape photography in America and the American West and all of that. So I bought these stamps and there's a picture of the Maroon Bells. And it's exactly the picture that I was trying to take. It's in black and white. I did color. I thought I got a great shot. But I realized that that's my equivalent, right? So I have these landscape images that are in my head that when I go out hiking, when we go out to the wilderness, I'm looking to constantly try to take that photograph, whether it's by the waterfall or the mountain peak or, wherever I go. I did a hike and went up to a mountaintop and I was like, oh, I'm going to take my pictures now, and I want them to look a certain way. And the certain way that I want them to look has to do with like the history of photography and landscape photographs. So it's in a lot of ways, it's very similar. It's that desire to replicate something that is aesthetically pleasing or that has some sort of cultural resonance. I think that's very similar with Instagram. But I think the same way that Instagram has these sort of parameters and boundaries in terms of your limitations, right? You're going to be surrounded by crowds. Like I think the rock you're talking about is we went out to Delicate Arch in Utah, which is like their iconic rock arch. And I probably waited a half an hour to get the photograph that I wanted. I probably spent 20 minutes finding the angle I wanted. And then maybe I spent 15 minutes waiting for people to not be in the picture. Right. So I have lots of pictures where there's 20 people who are gathered around the bottom of this rock. There would be a line of, like, now you go up in front of it, and now you come back, and now I go up in front of it, and they take my picture. And I just waited until there was enough room for the person who's taking the photograph was out of frame. The person in the photograph was hidden behind the rock arch, and the lighting was right, and I took the picture. But I think for a lot of people, whether it's something like that or they want to go up to that observation deck and get a photograph where it looks like it's just them, it's going to require planning and patience. And sometimes I'm not sure. I see the way people plan itineraries, and it's like, we're going to be up there. We're going to be up there for 15 minutes. Then we're going to leave, and then we're going to go to lunch, and then we're going to go and do this other thing. And I mean, my deep thought about this is it's partly what you want to get out of your trip.
Yeah.
Right. So if you have a very clear idea in mind, I want to go and I want to get all of these great, amazing photographs. That's going to require a certain amount of dedication to that. Some of that might be impossible, right? Like you might not ever get a good sunset. Can't force that.
Yeah. You really can't.
Right.
And the number of times I've been invited someplace to like capture beautiful views and it's like been raining.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I have some great shots of Times Square in the rain. I love my Times Square rain shots.
Sometimes rain makes better photos.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's the thing, is that if your goal is to do that, you need to understand that getting those photographs is going to require a slightly different experience of your trip, because you are going to have to plan that out. You're going to have to realize, like, all right, I need to be there in the morning because that's when the light, for the maroon bells, you have to be there at a certain time so you get the reflection on the water. Hopefully it's not too windy. Right. But again, even for that, like, I had to wait. I had to stop and wait for the people to get off the path and for other people to take photographs. It's a production.
Now, we have both had the experience of a tourist coming up to us, wanting a very specific photograph that doesn't exist. So I want to say that, first of all, I have so much tremendous respect for photographers. Very recently, I went to go see the New York Philharmonic perform in the park, and I recorded the fireworks afterwards. And I was like, oh, I'm like pretty happy with my fireworks.
Right.
I like posted my fireworks on my story. And then the next morning, my photographer friend started posting their videos of the fireworks. I was like, were we at the same fireworks?
Yeah.
Because like they are just like, their eye is so good. And what they were able to do was like really capture the emotion that everyone had watching those fireworks. Literally everyone was oohing and awing and applauding, and it was so exciting. And I'm like, kind of far away, just typical firework on your iPhone video. And then like these like truly great photographers and videographers, they were able to like really capture that emotion in a video. But that is different than when someone uses a lot of Photoshop to create something that doesn't exist.
Oh yeah. I think the number one New York Photoshop faux pas is the putting the Statue of Liberty right in front of One World Trade Center. So the Statue of Liberty is like 1,000 feet tall. It is not. It's a third of the size of One World, but it's sold all over. All over. You go up and down. Anybody who's selling photographs in Times Square or Battery Park is selling this photograph. It's like a panoramic shot, and it's like 90% Photoshop fake.
Yeah, both JT and I worked out on tour boats, and I would have people literally bring this photo up to me, and they were like, how can I get this photo? And sometimes there's a variation, I believe, of this photo where you have the Empire State Building, One World, and like Statue of Liberty all in a horizontal line, and that just doesn't exist. And this one guy, oh my goodness, he traveled from like Zimbabwe. It was so far. And he cried. And I was like, I'm sorry, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what kind of lens. I know some people are like, oh, if you get, no, the buildings are just not situated like that.
I mean, you might be able to go to Staten Island with a 1,000mm lens. It's just,
well, and then
I still don't think that's real.
You've maybe not seen this because you're not on Instagram as much as me, but there's like some place, I don't know if it's in India or Asia, but like there's this beautiful temple and it, like there's like an arch and girls stand under the arch in a beautiful dress. And then there's like this lake and their like reflection is in the lake and you're just like, oh, it looks
wow, that sounds amazing.
serene. Oh, it looks so amazing. And it's a guy who stands there with like a mirror and like a little bit of water. Like there's no lake there. Yep. There's literally no lake. So it's really cool if you want an amazing photo, but if you want that experience of like,
that's not a real experience.
Yeah, I'm at the serene temple. So that's like where it comes to like, what are you going for the photo or are you going for the emotion that the photo evokes?
Well, this is my other deep thought was just what are we doing when we travel? You know, like what is it that we're really getting out of it? And again, it's like if you are going and you want to create beautiful images and you want these wonderful pictures of you around the world, that's what you want. You know, I mean, I think one of the things that we've said over and over again in terms of travel, whether it's New York City to someplace else, is be selfish. It's your trip. You don't have to live up to anybody else's expectations of what a visit to New York City is going to be like. You should be true to yourself and what your own specific goals and desires are. So if that's what you want, that's fantastic. Know what you're getting into when you do that. Know that you're going to have to do a lot of these tricks and really dedicate yourself to finding the golden hour every day. And, you know, I can't do this because this is the one day when we're going to get a beautiful sunset. That's just how it is. But like, really, what is it for most people when they come to visit? I think that in a lot of ways, Instagram sort of sets that visual template. I should go and I should get this photograph. I should go and get that photograph. And why?
Well, I want to present another like interesting thing because you mentioned, can you tell I'm passionate about social media? You mentioned like what kind of travel, and we just spent so much time talking about like, you know, these beautiful photos and images and how to get these beautiful photos and images. And I'm thinking about my travel and my content, and I don't particularly think my content's that beautiful, but I think my content has very good tips and tricks, and I think that it's very history based. So people like to come and then be like, I have a fun fact about Battery Park to share with my friend, and then I realize that I consume a lot of like those tips and tricks. I get a lot of like restaurant recommendations from there. What's interesting is I just was in Paris and I used Google and I found best fondue in Paris. I went to this place. I'm going to mispronounce it. For some reason, this word's really hard for me. Le Refuge des Fondue. Refuge in French is very hard for me to pronounce.
Trivia.
And I found it using Google. It showed up.
Was it no good?
No, it was amazing.
Okay, good.
So we showed up 2 hours in advance. Well, okay, we didn't know we showed up 2 hours in advance. We just showed up and thought we were going to walk in. And they said, well, there's only 2 seatings a night and you are 2 hours early and you need a reservation, but you're the first people on the walk-in list. So if you stand here for 2 hours, maybe you'll get in, but you can't leave. So we were like, wow. Oh, okay. Well, we have nothing else to do. So we are going to stand here and hope that like we get in.
That is a dedication to fondue.
It was, I mean, it ended up being like very cutthroat. Like more people started coming and like trying to cut us in line on standby. Someone was like crying because they thought they made a reservation for tonight, but they had like actually made it for a week. At any rate, we got in. It was amazing. But we're like asking everybody, how did you find out about this? We were the only ones that did not find out about it on TikTok. Everybody else found out about it on TikTok. They were like, this was the one place we knew we had to go. They showed me the TikToks that they had seen, and it was exactly what we experienced. The TikToks, like it was not
Right.
Like it was not embellished. It
Right.
was just
It was true to form.
true to form. Like I got exactly, if I had found it on TikTok, I would have been very, very happy because it was exactly what those TikToks said.
Interesting.
And it had a well-deserved high Google rating. I loved it. So I think that, you know, we hear social media and we immediately think of the pretty girl in a dress,
Mm-hmm.
which takes so much skill. And I wish I was a pretty girl in a dress. So like no shade to them at all. But there's so many ways of using the social media.
Right.
And it doesn't even have to be an influencer or content creator. Like if you see a friend and the friend posts on Facebook, posts on Instagram, on TikTok, shows you a photo on their phone, sends a email blast with their Christmas cards, like you're gonna like get like their actual experience. So I think in some ways social media can be very like smoke and mirrors, but it can also be incredibly authentic and real, and you can get like any information that you want. I'm currently learning how to get a drone license. If you want to learn how to read METAR ratings, you can get that on social media.
I don't even know what you're talking about.
It's an aviation weather report.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know what? It's so funny. I was just remembering about, I feel so proud of myself. I did use social media to research something on a vacation, which was when we were in Colorado and we went to Maroon Bells. We wanted to do a hike. I wanted to do a good hike. Love wilderness. We were going to go someplace where we were going to see a certain kind of animal. I wanted to go someplace where we could see mountain goats. And I researched on YouTube because there's a lot of hiking videos on YouTube. And I researched that one of the mountains in the Maroon Bells Park has a trail where you can go and you can get up to a point and there's like mountain goats all around. Like you walk on this trail and it's actually like a hazard of the trail because you're supposed to wear a helmet because they like kicking rocks, right? And it's a steep incline. And so I actually was looking over and over again. I was like researching exactly like, okay, what mile is this? What point? What's the trail? And there's so many good videos. And so I have done that. I did see a mountain goat. I was the only one who did the hike.
Oh.
And it was really hard. Altitude sickness is a thing. But I did see a mountain goat way off in the distance, live and in person, found it myself.
I
Way
saw mountain
off.
goats in Greece.
They're very cool.
They are very cool.
I was very excited.
This also is like an interesting thing. I don't know what videos you were watching, but I find that a lot of YouTube videos, they tend to be more real, assuming you're not getting one of like the weird new AI generated ones. But
no, these were real.
Yeah, they tend to be real. But then we also haven't talked about live streaming. So live streaming, it's really interesting because I find that like when I'm doing my research, like I've bookmarked 1,000 things. I'm like searching my hashtags. There's that really wonderful personal connection I talked about where like I reached out to a tour guide, Sophie. I made a new friend. It's like a way of connecting in person. But I find that the live streams are what I really gravitate towards now when I'm trying to make a big financial travel decision. Because the live streams, they tell it as it is.
They really seem to be the most real experience.
Like you can see like how far away the beach is from your hotel. You can see like if you actually like if there's only one pretty patch that looks really pretty and everything else is like a little sketch, or if everything is beautiful. You can tell if like the person doing the live stream is getting mugged during the live stream or if they're like safe, which is like the interesting thing, right? Because we're in New York City and people are like, it's an anarchist jurisdiction, and meanwhile like I have friends who are like walking around with their selfie
live
sticks.
streaming, nothing's going on.
So I think that it's a really great way of being like, okay, what is actually going on?
I agree. I've seen some live streams of New York and I do think it's interesting. I mean, it is essentially, it's like the same thing that I was seeing with the hiking videos is it's really like, you're going to get here, this is going to happen, this is what it's going to look like. And that's kind of what I was looking for is what is it going to look like when I get to this point? And, you know, it's not like, oh, I turn left at that corner. It's like, oh, these are the rock formations when I need to like pay attention to where the trail splits off. But yeah, essentially the same thing. They had a GoPro on and it was just going live as they did the hike
Yeah.
along the way.
And I find like when I'm looking at creators, it's interesting to like kind of follow your own habits. Because a lot of the creators that I follow, I feel they're not using the most professional camera equipment. Like they're not using, as I try to get my drone license, but it's like there's this one guy, his name is Jordan Tawali. He travels the world. If you don't follow him, follow him. I've never met him. I would love to meet him. He seems really cool. But like his stuff just is so real. He's like literally just like selfing it. He's like, you guys, I think he's Australian. He's like, you guys, I'm going to Antarctica.
Wow.
And like because like it's so real, I think that people gravitate towards that as much as they gravitate towards the fantasy. And I think there's space for both. Because like when I'm in Paris, like I know I'm not on a rooftop in a ball gown, but I feel like I'm in a rooftop in a ball gown a lot of the time. If I go to the Opera Garnier, like I may have been walking around. I may be gross and sweaty. If I go to the Met in New York City, I maybe have been walking around and be gross and sweaty. But when I'm at the Met, I'm like,
I'm at the Met.
everything is beautiful. So you know, you're getting hyped up with the fantasy, and then you also get to see like the realness of it on social media.
Yeah. I mean, I think this would be maybe what I would say is that I do think that it's really easy to fall into a mode of travel where you're checking boxes. And I sort of have been in these conversations with people about social media, you know, and they say, oh, these people are just driving folks to go do this thing and see it and then sort of check off a box. And I say, honestly, this is nothing new. Social media has a different way of presenting that, but we've always had these boxes to check. I mean, how long have people been going to Paris to see the Eiffel Tower? Right. And then what do you do when you see the Eiffel Tower? Well, you've seen it. Okay. Maybe you're going to pay some money to go to the top of it, but that's still the same experience that hundreds of thousands of other people are having. And so is there validity in that? I mean, I would say that there is. It's one of the great icons, and to somehow interact with that and experience it is important. But I also think that part of what's useful about travel and maybe why people do travel or should travel is that you get to see the world in a way where you can, I guess, in some ways draw distinctions and find similarities. So you can find those little things. I mean, I have this funny thing where every time I fly to San Francisco, I love getting out at SFO because it smells different. New York and JFK, and this is not an insult, but JFK smells one way. SFO smells another way. It smells like eucalyptus from all the trees around. It has a distinctly different smell. San Francisco just smells different.
Palm Beach International smells different too. That's
right?
where I fly home to. It has like an
ocean smell or something, right?
I don't know if it's ocean smell. It's Florida smell.
Florida smell, right? And so I think that's really fascinating is you go someplace and you realize, oh, it smells different because there's all these other flowers. I don't have these flowers at home. Or there's the smell of the spices of a certain kind of ethnic cooking. Or, you know, I hear different things, right? There's some different feature. There's, you know, bikes going by with little ding, 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 ding bells. Or, you know, I hear all these different languages being spoken. I'm in Montreal and I never really thought I would be surrounded by all these French speaking people. And I just think that's fascinating. And going and saying, I want to Montreal again. I want to just try poutine. I've heard about this thing. I want to try it. And to be open to all of those different experiences. And I mean, I don't know how many other people travel that way or think that way. That's something for me that's always really profound, is to just try to pick up on all of those little minor differences as like, my world is like this and now I'm someplace else and it's different. And that's interesting to me, refreshing to me. It helps me come back and find appreciation for home. And so travel can kind of be an interesting experience that way, apart from just checking off those boxes. I don't know that any of those things are going to be things that you're going to find on social media because they're so particular.
It's really interesting that you mentioned that. And I think I don't know if it's my final thought on social media. I have so many thoughts. I love social media and I do love using it as a way of research for travel. But I do find that often I get overwhelmed by it. So like when I just remember being in Rome and I was crying because we couldn't get into, I think it's called Rascioli, which like every like person who has ever been to Rome is like, you have to go to Rascioli. And I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing it, but we didn't
But
know.
you didn't get in, so it doesn't matter.
Well, we didn't
Forget
know
about them.
that we had to make a reservation like more than a month in advance.
Yeah.
I kid you not.
That's like a lot of places in New York.
We were walking there and my mom's foot got run over by a car. Her foot
In
is
Rome?
fine.
Imagine that.
But like
I have a love-hate with Rome.
I just love Rome. I loved it. But I'm sitting here crying because I was like, oh, everybody on social media went into Rascioli and I was the only one. I didn't know. And I was like, oh my goodness, like you're in Rome, you're surrounded by delicious restaurants. Like it's okay if you don't go to Rascioli. Like I'm positive there's like at least one other good restaurant in Rome that makes some good pasta. And I realized like I'm having like a lot of fun like in the moment. Like recently when I was in Paris, I was like, I'm having a lot of fun. I left every day being like, this is a great day. But then I'd like be scrolling on social media and like my mom and I thought had a wonderful day shopping. And then I'd see on social media, they're like, if I only had 24 hours in Paris, this is the shopping route that I would do.
And
I was like,
we didn't do that.
Yeah, I was like, we didn't go to any of those. And I suddenly felt very bad. And I was like, no, like you had a great day. I bought this. Hope everyone likes this in Paris. So I think that it's important to not kind of, I don't know if it's keeping up with the Joneses or what that emotion is, but to when you're consuming the social media, figure out why you are consuming it. Like, what kind of traveler are you? What do you want to get? Do you want to find amazing restaurants? Social media can be a great way to find a restaurant recommendations. Do you want to like learn historical facts or like learn about scams or pro tips? That can be great. Do you just want to like get excited because you want to get hyped up for your trip and it's going to be like so romantic and like you're all like you're going to have your honeymoon there, or do you want to like hear very, very real reviews from people, perhaps in like a Facebook group, or do you want to look at a live stream and see like what the area looks like?
The real pulse of the city.
Yeah, just like unedited. Like, is that why you're consuming that social media? Is it like a combination of any or all of the above? But then like when you're there, to be able to just like engage with people, meet people, whether or not, like if you're on a cruise ship, it could be the people who you're cruising with, or it could be your tour guide, or it could be like the waiter. Just like interact with people, make observations. And if your plan A doesn't work out, like it's okay. Like we would have been fine if we didn't get into Le Refuge de Fondue. Like we would have found, we actually had 2 backup plans on that same street. And I'm positive that they would have been delicious, and it's okay. It's okay. And to just remember to enjoy your trip.
Yeah. I mean, I think in some ways it really is, as social media has so many useful functions. But sometimes in terms of using it exclusively to set your expectations of a place or your own particular experience, or to say, my visit is doesn't have the same quality or the same validity because I didn't check these specific boxes because that's what I saw on social media, can be problematic.
Yeah.
Right. And it's a little bit about like letting go of like the fear of missing out or not keeping up. Right. Or not checking all those boxes. Again, because like what I would say, and I think you would say this too, is you need to really check in with who you are and what you want out of the trip, right? And maybe sometimes that's hard. I think that might be part of it, is that sometimes it's just easier to say, this is a person who is like very attractive and seems to have a lovely life on social media, and I'd just like to live that life.
Yeah.
Right? Which is it's a little hard to do because that's a very constructed life. And maybe people think, well, because I'm on vacation, right? So for this
Yeah.
week that I'm on vacation, I'm going to pretend to be this person. Again, just challenging. I think that's challenging. And maybe sometimes if you reset expectations away from social media and just simply think, I want to go someplace and have my own experience, and I'm going to use some of these things that I'm seeing to help inspire me and guide me rather than as a template to copy.
Yeah. Those are wise words.
Oh, thanks.
I was just
I've been
thinking,
thinking about this a lot.
when I travel, I was telling my friends that in a way I get to pretend I'm a different person. Not I'm a different person as in like, call me Bernice, but
I'm going to write that down. That's what your secret name is.
but because I'm not working, right? I can be like, what would it be like if I, you know, actually had a personal chef who made me scrambled eggs and a fruit bowl every morning like I get at this hotel? Or if I actually had a glass of wine with every dinner and the dinners were luxurious and I didn't feel like I had to shove food in my face so I could get back to work. Like, what would it be like to do these things? Or if I only ate amazing cheeses. And then whatever, or like sleep until noon, like whatever it is that you're doing, or what would it be like if I actually woke up at 7 or earlier every morning and did a workout
Because
on
you wanted to and not
Yeah.
because you had to go to work.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
and then I can like take those bits and like bring them home with me and like try to incorporate stuff that I liked from that person, the travel
Bernice.
Megan from Bernice into my everyday life. But I do think that it is like, yeah, don't forget to connect with the people who you're traveling with the people who you're engaging with. And that, yeah, it is. I think that social media is a valuable tool. But if you think about it, if you got a guidebook, you could never do everything in that guidebook.
Mhm.
And the guidebook is finite. There's like
Yeah.
a number of pages to a
Mhm.
guidebook, but social media is infinite. Every day there's going to be new recommendations
Mhm.
for New York City, for Paris, for Milan, for Rome, for South
Oh,
Africa.
maybe not for Milan.
But like it's infinite. So you're always like having information being sent to you, which is great because there's endless inspiration.
Mhm.
But you also just have to be like, okay, what is it that I want? And then when you're in the moment, just be like, I'm in Milan
Mhm.
doing my thing with like wonderful people and good food. Or maybe you find the one bad restaurant in Milan. I don't know. Then you can laugh about it. It's a story. So, yeah, use social media as a tool. Be mindful about how you're using it as a tool. And no matter what, be selfish and enjoy your trip.
I think that's a perfect way to finish.
Yes. So thank you so much for tuning in. Again, if you found this useful, feel free to share it with someone and click subscribe because it helps us bring you more information like this. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a most marvelous time in New York City.
See you in the city soon.